Welcome, everybody. So good to have you here today. And let me give a big shout out, as I always do, to those of you who are joining us by video at our Clark Summit campus to the north, those of you joining us at our Wilkes-Barre campus to the south, and those of you who are watching online in homes, in offices, and coffee shops. Great to be together again wherever you happen to be right now as we continue this teaching series. It's called The Christian Atheist. And if you were here last week, you might remember as we began this series, I talked about the fact that technically you can't be a Christian and an atheist. It just isn't possible to be both a Christian and an atheist. But here's what is possible. It is possible for us to drift into being Christians who live like atheists and look like atheists. In other words, it's possible to believe what a Christian believes. It's possible to have the right theology, but then in the everyday details of life, we can drift into living as if God does not exist or does not care. Now, the idea behind this series comes from a book by the same title by Craig Groeschel. It's called The Christian Atheist. And so if you enjoy this series, you can dig in a little bit deeper and you can buy a copy of that book and read it on your own. But as I was thinking about this problem of Christian atheism, I was reminded of something that happened about 24 years ago. This was 1993. There was a group of people who were upset at the Mattel Corporation at the way they were marketing Barbie dolls and creating Barbie dolls because they felt like Barbie dolls reinforced certain gender stereotypes. And so they wanted to make their point in a very memorable way. And so here's what they did. They went into toy stores and they bought 150 talking Barbie dolls, and they bought 150 talking G.I. Joes, and then they swapped out the electronics. They took the voice boxes from the Barbies and put them in the G.I. Joes, and they took the voice boxes from the G.I. Joes and they put them into the Barbies. True story, I'm not making this up. And then they took them back to the stores and secretly put them back on the shelves. And so Christmas morning, 1993, there were children who woke up and opened their Christmas presents to great surprise because there were little girls that held the Barbie doll that they wanted for so long, and they pushed the button to make her talk, and she said, "Attack with heavy firepower." And there were little boys holding their G.I. Joes in his fatigues with his machine gun, with his hand grenades, and they pushed the button to make G.I. Joe talk, and he said, "Let's plan our dream wedding." True story, I'm not making that up, that actually happened. But in my mind, a Christian atheist is like that. It's when we say one thing, but look a different way. It's when there's a disconnect between what comes out of our mouths and what people see in our lives. And I'll be honest with you, any of us can struggle with this. I mean, I can drift into areas of Christian atheism in my life where I can say one thing and live another way. And so during this series, we're talking about five, different aspects of what we're calling Christian atheism, 5 different statements that reflect this attitude of being a Christian, but living as if God does not exist. So last week, we began this series, and we talked about this statement: I believe in God, but let's not go overboard. And we talked last week about what it looks like to move out of your comfort zone and get out of the boat and be all in as a follower of Christ. And if you weren't here last week, always go online and catch up and watch last week's message. Today, though, week number 2, we're gonna talk about this statement: I believe in God, but I still worry all the time. Because when you go through life consumed with worry, it's an indication that God is not a part of the equation. When you walk through life constantly worried, then you're living as if God does not exist. And I wonder how many of you came in here today with some worry on your hearts and on your minds. I wonder how many of you have ever struggled with worry. How many of you know what it's like to worry about a job, or to worry about a prodigal child, or to worry about a health issue, or to worry about financial issues? In fact, let's just all be blatantly honest, okay? On every campus, I just want you to raise your hand if there's ever been a time in your life when worry has ever gotten the best of you. Go ahead and raise your hand if that's true. Yeah, and if there's somebody next to you who didn't raise their hand, it's only because they were worried about what you would think if they raised their hand, see? Because we've all struggled with worry. All of us, maybe not to the same degree, because some of that depends on personality and family background. We all struggle with it to some degree, if not to the same degree. But here's the good news. People have been struggling with worry and dealing with worry for more than 2,000 years. And I know that because Jesus himself addressed the subject of worry extensively. We're going to focus our attention for a few minutes on Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. Matthew, the first book in the second half of the Bible, the New Testament, the story of Jesus according to Matthew. If you have a Bible, you can turn there or bring it up on a Bible app or just follow along on the screens. But let me set up the context for you. This is a part of the Bible that is commonly known as the Sermon on the Mount, because Jesus here was teaching a crowd of people on a hillside. And he was teaching them about what it would look like for them to live as people of his kingdom, what it looks like for us to be followers of Christ. And in these 10 verses here, he talks about the struggle that every human being has with worry. Here's what he says. Let me just read it for you and listen as I read. He says, "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes?" He says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you? You have little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or, my daughters who are watching this, underline this, what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now, if I were to try to summarize in a memorable way what I believe Jesus was communicating in that part of the Sermon on the Mount, I would summarize it in this very simple statement. If you don't write anything else down today, maybe write this down. Here's the truth about worry. Worry won't solve my problems. It will only steal my joy. Worry can't solve a single problem in your life, and we'll talk about why that is, but it can do this. It can steal your joy. Now, before we go any further, I think we need to define what we're talking about, okay? So what is worry? Well, you may be familiar with the Bible enough to know that the New Testament was originally written in Greek. And so the Greek word that gets translated into English in our Bibles is actually a compound word. It literally means this. It literally means to divide the mind. And that's what worry does. It divides the mind. It divides our minds between what's going on in our lives right now and what's coming in the future. It divides our minds between what's happening around us and what's preoccupying us. And so if I were to give you a definition of worry based on this passage, I would say this: worry is a preoccupation with possible future events. And I say possible because so much of what we worry about never happens, does it? I mean, I know I've spent a lot of sleepless nights worrying about things that never saw the light of day because it was all in my mind. Worry is a preoccupation with possible future events that makes it difficult to focus on the present. Worry essentially is this: it's living in the land of what if. What if my teenage driver has an accident? What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I don't have enough for retirement? What if my car breaks down? What if? What if? What if? And we look into the future and we look at all the possible negative scenarios, and they begin to multiply and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just steals our joy. Let me give you a very simple way to think about worry and how it works. So I brought with me a pair of binoculars, just a random pair of kids' binoculars. And binoculars, they can be a very handy thing to have. Like if you're out hiking, it's good to use them to see, the destination out in front of you. If you're a bird watcher, got to have binoculars. If you're watching a football game and you're way up in the nosebleed section, it's good to have the binoculars so you can actually see the game as if you were home on your couch watching it on TV. So binoculars, they can be very handy, but if you were to go through life constantly looking through the binoculars, you wouldn't be able to function very well because you would stumble and you would fall and you would trip over things right in front of you. Like if I tried to walk down the steps off of the stage right now, I would probably fall and it would end up on YouTube and I'd be very embarrassed. Because if you're focused on what's way out there, and some of you, I've never actually seen you up close like this before. You're like right next to me. But I'm so focused on what's out there, if you were standing right here next to me, I probably wouldn't even know you were there. That's what worry is like. Worry is when we go through life constantly focused on what's out there, what may be coming, what's around us, and we focus on that and it gets magnified and it gets so big to the point where we can't even appreciate what's happening right around us. See, and if you live that way long enough, and if you look through those binoculars often enough, and if that becomes a habit of your life, it can be so debilitating. There was a 37-year-old woman from New York City who posted something on Twitter earlier this year. She said this, "I don't hear from my friend for a day. My thought, they don't want to be my friend anymore." And then she adds this hashtag, "This is what anxiety feels like." And that hashtag, that went viral. And within a couple of days, there were thousands of people posting things on Twitter with that hashtag. Like, I'll show you a few of them. Here's the first one: creating solutions to things that aren't even problems, except in my head. This is what anxiety feels like. Here's another one: never being able to enjoy achievements for more than a few minutes because something is bound to screw up. Looking through those binoculars, magnifying the potential of what's out there. This is what anxiety feels like. Here's a third one: replaying all the conversations I've had today. One more. The train is being held by the dispatcher for 10 minutes now, and I don't know what's going on. Am I going to die? This is what anxiety feels like. See, worry, anxiety, it won't solve your problems, but it will steal your joy. So Jesus says, do not worry. 3 times in this passage, do not worry, do not worry, do not worry. Don't allow your mind to be divided. And then he says 3 things about worry. The first thing he says about worry is this: that worry is needless. He says, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. And by the way, Jesus was speaking to people who lived in a very different world than our world. They lived in a world where there was virtually no middle class. Most of the people he was speaking to would have been very poor, and any income they did get, 40% of it was taken in taxes by the Roman Empire. So these were people who literally worried about whether they would have enough to eat, whether they would have clothes to wear. It's a very different world. You know, we live very comfortable lives. We are very blessed, and yet we still worry, don't we? It's just that we worry about other things. Will I get that job promotion? Will I have enough for my kids' college education? Will my kids turn out okay? You know, will terrorism or nuclear weapons bring destruction to my country? Will I have what I need to pay my bills? You know, we worry about all these things. But I think Jesus would say the same thing to us that he said to them when he talked about food, when he talked about water. He says, don't worry about that stuff. And then here's why. He says, is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Well, what did he mean by that? And let me unpack that. I think here's what Jesus meant. I think he was arguing from the greater to the lesser, from the bigger to the smaller. He says, if we believe there is a God who created life, then certainly we can trust that God to give us the food that we need to sustain life. He said, if we believe there is a God who can do the bigger thing, create our bodies, then certainly we can trust that God to provide what we need to clothe our bodies. I think he was arguing from the greater to the lesser. And then he goes on to kind of drive home that idea by talking about birds and flowers. Because remember, he was teaching outside on a hillside. There were probably birds flying overhead, probably flowers nearby. He was probably pointing to them as he talked. And here's what he says in verse 26. He says, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Like think about it. Birds are pretty helpless when it comes to providing for themselves, right? They don't plant any crops. They don't build any silos. They don't stockpile any food. And yet they always are fed because there is a God who created the world with a system in which those birds would always be fed. But here's the important part of verse 26. Jesus goes on to say this, are you not much more valuable than they? I mean, birds are a beautiful part of creation, but we, as God's children, are the apex of his creation. We are created in his image, redeemed by Jesus Christ. If birds are important, how much more important are you in the eyes of your heavenly Father? And then in verse 28, Jesus says this, he says, and why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. And when Jesus spoke of flowers here, he was talking about wildflowers that grew out in the open. He was probably pointing to some of them. This is a picture of some wildflowers actually in the land of Israel near the Sea of Galilee. And here's what would happen. Every once in a while, a housewife would go outside and she would gather up some of these wildflowers and she would cut them and then she would dry them. And do you know what she would do with these after they were dried? Post a picture on Pinterest. No. She would actually take these and she would put them into the brick oven to use as kindling for the fire when she would make dinner. And so that's why Jesus says here in verse 30, as he talks about the flowers, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you of little faith? In other words, if God in his creative work would give that much care and attention to flowers, how much more care and attention does he want to shower on you, created in his image? So Jesus says, look at the birds, look at the flowers. And I think if Jesus were here today, if he were speaking to us, I think he would say something else as well. He would say, look at a cross on a hill just outside the city of Jerusalem. Because it was on that cross, after he had taken on human flesh and stepped into this broken world, it was on that cross that he died, and his blood stained the timbers of that cross so that you and I could be forgiven, so that we could be rescued, so that we could be with him forever. And Jesus says, listen, your worry is needless, because you have a Father in heaven who loves you more than you can understand and who will care for you. If you don't believe me, look at the birds. If you don't believe me, look at the flowers. And I think Jesus would say, and if you don't believe me, look at a cross. Now, some of you are here today, and you carried in here some worries about some very significant challenges in your life. And you've got some things in your life that you are deeply worried about. And I don't want to try to minimize what you're feeling today. I don't want to try to minimize that and say that what you're feeling isn't that big of a deal. And I don't think Jesus is saying that either in this passage. He's not saying you don't need to worry because your situation isn't really that bad. He says you don't need to worry because your Father loves you that much. And you are that valuable to him. And that's why your worry is needless. And let's be honest, sometimes your worries become reality. There's no guarantee that everything in your life is going to work out okay. Sometimes things are painful, but the promise is this, not that everything is going to work out okay. The promise is this, whatever your future holds, you have a Father in heaven who loves you unconditionally, and your future is in his hands. And because of that, your worry is needless. Now, before we move on, I need to stop and make a very, very important point here. Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. He didn't say, don't plan for tomorrow. He didn't say, don't work toward tomorrow. He didn't say, don't prepare for tomorrow, because those are very different things. He said, don't worry about tomorrow, because I don't want you to leave here today thinking that I'm proposing that you be irresponsible. I don't want the teenagers who are hearing this message to go home and this fall when it's time to study for a test say, well, Mark said and Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow, so I'm not going to study. If your marriage is in trouble and your partner says, your wife or husband says, listen, I think we need some marriage counseling, you can't say, well, Jesus said not to worry about tomorrow, so I'm not going to worry about it. It will take care of itself. No, that's not the point. In fact, you remember back in 1998, There was this, 1988 actually, there was this song, and it actually won the Grammy for Song of the Year. It was this little, kind of silly song by Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. Do, 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 do. You know that song? I can't sing it. But, you know, if you've ever heard that song, whether you like it, whether you hate it, it gets stuck in your head, doesn't it? But did you ever notice the lyrics to that song? Like, here's what the song said. Ain't got no place to lay your head. Somebody came and took your bed. Don't worry, be happy. Goes on to say this. The landlord say your rent is late. He may have to litigate. Don't worry, be happy. Third verse. Ain't got no cash, ain't got no style, ain't got no gal to make you smile. Don't worry, be happy. I would suggest to you that if all of those things are happening in your life right now, you should worry. Like you got to deal with some of that stuff, right? Somebody came and stole your bed, file a police report, for goodness sake. Your landlord's going to litigate? Well, get a second job and get your rent caught up, okay? Ain't got no gal to make you smile? Get a haircut, wear a shirt with buttons on it, and take some initiative, guys, see? There's a time for problem solving. There's a time for taking action. Jesus would say, be responsible. Study for the test. Go to the interview. Pay as many bills as you can. Do your part. But here's the thing. Once you've done your part, once you've done whatever it is that means being responsible for your side of the equation, at that point, you just entrust your future into the hands of a God who loves you and a God who cares for your every need. Because at that point, worry is worthless. It's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to steal your joy. So Jesus says, first of all, here's the thing about worry. It's needless because you have a Father in heaven who loves you and cares for you. Look at the birds. Look at the flowers. Look at the cross. But then he says this also. I love this question. Worry is worthless. Verse 27. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Obviously, the answer to that question is no. And probably some of you have worried so much you've taken a couple of years off your life or the life of your spouse. The point is that worry in and of itself cannot solve a single problem. It just can't. This really, I remember a time when this really hit home for me. This was some years ago. I was in Atlanta. I'd gone there for a conference. And the conference was over at 5:30 on a Friday. And so after the conference, I had to get to the Atlanta airport, which was on the other side of the city. So I'm driving through the city of Atlanta at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. What do you suppose that was like? 8 lanes of traffic in one direction at a standstill. And so I'm sitting in the car, and my flight is in the not too distant future that evening, and nobody's moving. And I'm starting to get really stressed out because I've got to catch a flight from Atlanta to Philly, then I've got to drive home from Philly to here, and then I've got to be prepared to do a church service the next night on Saturday because this is Friday. And so I'm sitting there, the traffic's not moving, the time is ticking by, and my stress level's going up and up and up, and I'm starting to think, what if I don't get there in time and miss that flight? What if there's not another flight tonight, because there probably isn't? What if all the flights tomorrow are booked? What if I don't get home in time for church? What if I get fired because I'm not home in time? You know, all these scenarios. And then to make matters worse, one of the other pastors who was on staff at the time was with me in the car, and he's over in the passenger seat, and his seat is reclined, and he's sleeping. Okay, and that just frustrated me more because he was not pulling his share of the worry load. And I was studying Matthew at the time. I remember I just read this passage, and this verse came to my mind. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? If I can paraphrase that, can any one of you, by worrying, subtract a single hour from your travel time? And I thought to myself, you know what? Worry has never solved a traffic jam. Worry is worthless in this situation. So I made a decision, a conscious decision, right there in that moment and said, you know what, God? I'm not going to worry anymore. And I started honking my horn instead. Actually, I made that part up. But see, here's the thing. Worry, Jesus says, is worthless in terms of actually accomplishing anything. I mean, once you've done everything you can do in the now, worrying about the future won't really change anything. In fact, let me just take this a step further. Not only is worry worthless in terms of it being unproductive, I believe that worry is worthless in terms of it actually being counterproductive. Because think about this, if you worry all the time about getting sick, you might actually increase your chances of getting sick. Right? If you worry all the time that you're going to get fired from your job, you might actually negatively impact your job performance. If you worry all the time about the fact that you're overweight, what's one of the ways that we cope with anxiety? By eating, yes. So worry is not only unproductive, it can actually be counterproductive. It won't solve my problems. It'll just steal my joy. And so Jesus says, do not worry. It's needless. You have a Father in heaven. It's worthless. Can't add a single hour to your life by worrying. But then he says this, and this is really the gut punch right here. He says, worry is godless. He says, so do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans, and a pagan is simply somebody who doesn't recognize the existence of God. For the pagans run after all these things, but your heavenly Father knows that you need them. See, when we get consumed by worry, what happens is our focus gets riveted on all the stuff of this world, and we forget that there's a God out there, and we begin living like Christian atheists as if God does not exist. You know, I did a lot of reading this week about issues of worry and anxiety, and it's very interesting that anxiety in our culture is at its highest level ever. And I'm not just saying that as an opinion. I am saying that from statistical studies that anxiety in our culture is at an all-time high. And I would suggest this. I believe that the rise of anxiety in our culture is a direct result of the decline of faith in our culture. And here's why I believe that. Because if you think that the only reason that we're here is because of a series of random accidents in nature, and if you believe there is no higher power, and if you believe that our lives are just driven by chance like a leaf in the wind, then you have got every reason to worry. You should worry. But if you really believe that there is a God who has created this world, a God who loves us completely and who knows us intimately, then you need not worry. In fact, worry is a form of Christian atheism. So let me just review for you here. Jesus said this. He said, worry is needless. It's worthless. In fact, it is godless. Now, if I were to stop the message right there, that might be discouraging, right? Because all I've done so far is tell you that worry is really bad. Okay, so don't worry. And if some of you are worriers, right? And so if you tell a worrier it's not good to worry, what's a worrier going to do about that? They're going to worry about how they worry, you know? So we need a solution, okay? So we need an alternative to this. And so Jesus continues teaching, and here's where he gives this very, very powerful solution to the worry that we so often drift into. In verse 33, he says this, but instead of all that needless, worthless, godless worry, he says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. When worry and anxiety begin to overwhelm us, we need to stop looking at all the what ifs and the potential problems. And Jesus said, I want you to seek first God's kingdom, because when you begin to seek first God's kingdom, the worries out there begin to fade, and everything in life begins to assume its proper perspective. In fact, let me give you a very practical application of this. We live in a culture where we have 24/7 news coverage, right? And that can be a good thing. It can also be a really bad thing, especially if you're a worrier, because we're constantly bombarded every day with bad news. And it's interesting, every news story now is a crisis, right? Every news story is breaking news. And that's because bad news sells. And the bigger the crisis, the more people tune in or click or whatever. And so we're surrounded constantly by all this bad news. Here's, I think, one of the best things you can do, one of the best takeaways of this message. Turn off your TV. Shut down your computer. And make it a consistent habit of your life to just seek first God's kingdom. What does that look like? I think it includes a number of things. It could be many things. It could include prayer. Whatever it is that you're tempted to worry about, you pray about that. Even better, pray about somebody else's need. Get the focus off yourself. It means immersing yourself in the truth of Scripture. If you tend to worry, just read this passage over and over again. It might mean serving others, being involved in a serving team here at church, because I've discovered that when I start serving other people, I'm far less preoccupied with all the what ifs and the problems in my own life. I think seeking God's kingdom first always includes worship. See, sometimes you just got to worship your way out of your worry. You remember the story of Job in the Old Testament? The story of Job is a fascinating but difficult story. You know, Job, in one day's time, he lost all of his livestock, all of his servants, and even all of his children. And when he received that news, here's how he responded. Then he fell to the ground in, what's that word? In worship. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. I would suggest to you that the one thing that Job most needed to do in that moment was to worship. That the only way to deal with this great tragedy was to get his eyes off of his situation and to look to his Father in heaven. See, sometimes we got to worship our way out of our worry. That can be what it looks like to seek first the kingdom of God. See, when you worry, when you find yourself consumed by worry, it's like you're looking through binoculars. And all you can see is what's out there. And it's so big, and it's so close, and it's so overwhelming. So here's the solution to worry. You got to flip the lens. Because you've been looking through the lens of your own little perspective. Like you got to look through the bigger lens. Right here. This is the lens of God's love for you. This lens is called what God has done for you, what God has done for others. This lens is the lens of God's power and God's sovereignty. And it's interesting, when you look through this lens, all that stuff out there doesn't look so daunting anymore. Like you're not half the man you used to be when I looked at this the other few minutes ago. Like the job situation, it's still out there. The health situation, it's still out there. The prodigal child situation, it's still out there, but it just doesn't seem as big anymore because you're seeking first God's kingdom and you're looking at all that stuff through the lens of His love and His grace and His power in your life. See, worry won't solve your problems. It'll just steal your joy. And I'll tell you, life is too short. And joy is too wonderful, and God is too good, and you are too valuable to go through life that way. And so Jesus says, do not worry, do not worry, do not worry. Seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness. And when we seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness, He will lead us into the life that He really wants us to live, a life of joy, a life of blessing, a life of peace.